The arrow left Kiara Ashford's bow in complete silence. No whistle of wind, no hum of string, just the cold, perfect arc of ash wood and steel cutting through the twilight air toward the Alpha King's heart. She hadn't meant to shoot him, not exactly, but when Darius Wolfhart materialized from the shadows of the training yard like some ghost returned from the Borderlands War, her hands had remembered older instincts. Muscle memory older than grief, older than the 3 years she'd spent teaching herself not to feel. The arrow embedded itself in the oak post 2 inches from his left ear. He didn't flinch. Kira's breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. The bow trembled in her grip, not from fear, but from the sudden, unwelcome realization that her aim had been off. She never missed. Not in 3 years of relentless practice. Not since the morning she'd learned that perfect precision could replace the messy business of emotion. Darius stepped into the torchlight, and she saw him clearly for the first time since his return. 35 years old, though, the war had carved him into something that looked older, harder. A scar traced the left side of his jaw where some Borderlands blade had nearly taken his life. His eyes, gold in the firelight, ancient and knowing, settled on her face with an intensity that made her want to run. "Your aim is off weapons, Master," he said. His voice carried the texture of smoke and gravel, familiar in a way that hurt. Or perhaps exactly where you wanted it. Kira lowered the bow slowly. Around them, the training yard had gone silent. Young wolves who'd been practicing combat drills now stood frozen, watching their king and their weapons master with barely concealed fascination. She could feel their eyes like brands against her skin. "A warning, Your Majesty," she said. The formal title tasted like ash. "You shouldn't approach someone from behind when they're armed." "I'll remember that." He moved closer, boots silent on the packed earth. Everything about Darius Wolfhart was controlled, measured, deliberate. Nothing like the laughing, reckless man she'd married at 23. Nothing like Callum, who'd burned bright and fast and left her drowning in the aftermath. The thought of her dead husband sent the familiar ice spreading through her chest. Good, she needed that ice. Had spent 3 years building it layer by careful layer until she could function without feeling. Until she could stand in this training yard and teach young wolves how to kill without remembering that killing had taken everything she loved. "The council is gathering, Darius said quietly. His eyes hadn't left her face, searching for something she refused to give. "Your presence is requested. I'm training recruits until moonrise. They can wait." Not a command exactly, but the weight of an alpha's will pressed against the words nonetheless. Kira felt her wolf stir beneath her skin, restless, agitated, wanting things she'd forbidden it to want. She crushed the feeling ruthlessly. "As you wish, my lord." She turned without waiting for dismissal, acutely aware of his gaze following her across the yard. Behind her, she heard young Finnegan whisper to his training partner, "Did you see that she actually shot at the king?" "He deserved it," someone else muttered. "Everyone knows what happened to her husband." The words followed Kira into the fortress like ghosts. The council chamber smelled of old stone and burning sage. Kira took her place at the curved oak table, flanked by faces she'd known all her life. Elder Miriam, ancient and sharp-eyed, who'd delivered Kira into this world 29 years ago. Counselor Broderick Thorne, jaw set in its perpetual expression of disapproval. Tamsin Holloway, her oldest friend, who met her eyes with a look of mingled concern and curiosity. Darius sat at the head of the table, backlit by the great hearth. The firelight turned his hair to copper and shadow. "We gather on the eve of the king's return," Elder Miriam intoned, her voice carrying the weight of ritual, "to acknowledge bonds both broken and newly formed." Kira's hands tightened on the armrests. No, she knew what was coming. Had known from the moment Darius stepped off his warhorse 3 days ago and looked at her across the crowded courtyard with recognition that went deeper than memory. The kind of recognition that spoke of fate and inevitability and all the things she'd sworn to never believe in again. "I stand before this council," Darius said, and his voice held none of its usual command, only a strange, vulnerable honesty that made her chest ache. "To declare what cannot be denied. I have found my fated mate." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Kira Ashford," he continued, eyes locked on hers across the table. "Weapons master of this pack, widow of Callum Ashford, who died with honor in the Borderlands, and the other half of my soul." Silence crashed over the room like a wave. Kira stood slowly, feeling the eyes of the council upon her, feeling the weight of expectation, of ancient law, of a fate she'd never asked for. "No." The word came out harder than she intended, colder, but she didn't soften it. "I had my chance at love, Your Majesty. It died 3 years ago on frozen ground bleeding out from wounds your war inflicted. I won't, her voice cracked just slightly. I won't survive that again. She saw something flicker in Darius's eyes. Pain, maybe, or understanding. I'm not asking you to forget him, he said quietly. I'm asking for a chance to prove that surviving isn't the same as living. I'm alive enough. Are you? His gaze held hers with uncomfortable intensity. Because from where I'm standing, you look like a ghost haunting a training yard, teaching others how to fight while you've already surrendered. The truth of it struck like a physical blow. This assembly is not a debate. Elder Miriam cut in her voice sharp as winter wind. Ancient law is clear. The Crimson Moon Festival falls 6 weeks hence. Any unmated wolf above the age of 25 must declare their choice bond with a chosen mate or accept exile from the pack. Kira's blood turned to ice. Exile. The law stands unchanged for 3 centuries, Broderick said, and there was something almost satisfied in his tone. You've avoided it for 3 years by claiming mourning rights. But those rights expire at the 3rd festival. You knew this day would come. She had known, had pushed it to the back of her mind, buried it beneath training drills and careful numbness. But now it rose before her like a wall she couldn't climb. I propose a compromise, Darius said, and every head turned toward him. 30 days. Give me 30 days to court you properly, Kira. No bond, no claiming, no pressure. Just let me try. If at the end of that time you still wish me gone, I'll support your choice before this council. You can't override ancient law, Broderick protested. I can if she accepts the courtship. Darius's eyes never left Kira's face. The law permits traditional courting periods. 30 days is well within bounds. Elder Miriam made a sound that might have been approval. The Alpha King speaks truth, but Mistress Ashford must agree willingly. All eyes turned to Kira. She wanted to refuse, wanted to walk out of this chamber and keep walking until she reached some place where fate and feeling couldn't follow. But then she thought of Bryn, her 19-year-old sister, headstrong and brilliant and constantly in trouble with the Merchant Guild for running an illegal market stall. If Kira was exiled, Bryn would lose her guardian's protection, would face arrest or worse. The walls were closing in. 30 days, she heard herself saying. Her voice sounded distant, hollow. But when the crimson moon rises and I still refuse this bond, you'll honor that choice. No arguments, no alpha commands. You'll let me go. Darius's expression shifted into something she couldn't read. Ready for both? I give you my word, he said, as alpha and as a man who knows what it means to lose. The council murmured approval. Elder Miriam pronounced the courtship officially recognized. Broderick looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. Kira barely heard any of it. She was too busy trying to breathe through the sudden, overwhelming sense of being trapped in a current she couldn't control. Later, when the council had dispersed and the fortress settled into its evening rhythms, she found Tamsin waiting in the armory. You shot at him, her friend said without preamble. I heard. My hand slipped. Your hand never slips. Tamsin settled onto the workbench, arms crossed. You gonna tell me what you're really feeling, or are we still pretending you don't have emotions? Kira busied herself checking bowstrings that didn't need checking. I'm fine. You're scared. The word hung between them, too accurate to deny. He's not Callum, Tamsin said softly. He's not trying to replace what you lost. I know that. Kira's hand stilled on the bowstring. That's not what scares me. Then what does? She looked up, meeting her friend's eyes. That I might want this, that I might let myself hope again, and then lose everything a second time. I barely survived the first loss. I won't survive another. Tamsin crossed the space between them, pulled her into a fierce embrace. Then you survive it. Same way you survived losing Callum. Same way you survive every damn day. But Kira wasn't sure she had survived, not really. She'd just learned to function while dead inside. The books started appearing the next morning. Kira found the first one on her workbench, a leather-bound volume on the history of archery in the Northern Territories. No note, no explanation, just the book carefully placed where she'd see it with a ribbon marking a chapter on ancient hunting techniques. She ran her fingers over the embossed cover, recognizing it as rare. Expensive. The kind of thing she would have treasured before grief taught her that treasuring anything only gave the world more to take away. The second book appeared 2 days later, a collection of strategic analyses from famous battles. The third, a volume of poetry she'd mentioned loving once years ago in a conversation she barely remembered. He was listening, had been listening perhaps for longer than she knew. The realization unsettled her. But more unsettling were the other things, the training equipment that mysteriously repaired itself overnight. The loose fence board in the practice yard that appeared solid one morning. The broken door on the armory that she'd been meaning to fix for months, suddenly hanging true on new hinges. Darius never mentioned any of it, never sought credit or acknowledgement. He simply showed up. In the training yard at dawn and attempting archery with endearing awkwardness. At council meetings where he deferred to her expertise on defensive strategies. In the great hall at dinner where he sat 3 seats away and never pressured her to move closer. He's courting you the old way, Isolde Greymantle observed one afternoon in the second week. The older woman had appeared in Kira's life a week into the 30 days returning to the pack after 20 years of wandering. 62 years old, scarred from a lifetime of battle and carrying the quiet strength of someone who'd survived losing everything and learned to build something new from the ruins. The old way, Kira asked. They were sitting in the fortress gardens, Isolde mending torn leather armor, while Kiera fletched new arrows. Around them, early spring flowers pushed through the last of winter's frost, stubborn and hopeful in equal measure. Actions, not words. My mate courted me that way before the war took him. Isolde's hands never stopped working, but her voice carried the weight of memory. He fixed my father's plow, sharpened my knives, left fresh game at our door, never asked for thanks, just showed me who he was through what he did. And you fell for it. I fell for him. Isolde's smile held both joy and sorrow. Loved him for 12 years before he died. Would do it all again, grief and all for those 12 years. Kira's hands stilled on the arrow shaft. How did you survive it after? By remembering that love doesn't end just because life does. By honoring what we had instead of pretending it never existed. By living fully enough for both of us. The older woman looked up, eyes sharp. You think refusing to love again honors Callum's memory. But I knew your husband, child. He'd hate what you've become. The words struck like a slap. You didn't know him, Kira said, but her voice lacked conviction. I knew him well enough to know he'd want you happy. Alive. Not this walking corpse you've turned yourself into. Kira stood abruptly, scattering arrows. I should check the new recruits. Running won't change the truth, Isolde called after her. But Kira was already gone, fleeing into the fortress like she'd been fleeing from everything that mattered for 3 long years. The days bled together after that. 20 days. 25. 28. Kira watched Darius from a distance, saw the way he led the pack with quiet strength, the way he listened to the lowest Omega's concerns with the same attention he gave his war council. The way he carried himself, not with the reckless bravado she'd loved in Callum, but with a steadiness that spoke of someone who'd seen darknesses and chosen to build light anyway. She saw the way young wolves looked up to him, the way Bryn smiled when he praised her metalwork at the market, the way even Broderick's suspicious traditional Broderick softened slightly under Darius's patient leadership, and she felt something crack in the ice around her heart. On day 29, she taught him archery again. He was improving slowly, though he'd never be more than adequate. But he tried. God's help her, he tried with such earnest determination that she found herself almost smiling. You're pulling left, she said, moving to adjust his stance. Her hands settled on his shoulders, and she felt him tense at the contact, felt the warmth of him through the thin fabric of his shirt. Like this. He drew the bowstring back, and she saw the slight tremor in his arms from the effort. Better. Now release smoothly, don't jerk. The arrow flew true, striking the outer ring of the target. I hit it. Darius turned to her with such genuine delight that something in her chest twisted painfully. You hit the target, she corrected, not the center. I'll take the victory anyway. His smile faded as he saw her expression. Kira, what's wrong? She stepped back, putting distance between them. Nothing. I need to go. Wait. His hand caught her wrist, gentle but insistent. Talk to me, please. There's nothing to talk about. There's 30 days worth of things we haven't talked about. His thumb traced circles on her pulse point, and she knew he could feel her heart racing. I know you're afraid. I know you think loving again means betraying what you had. But Kira, I'm afraid too. She looked up, startled by the admission. I'm afraid, he continued, voice rough with emotion, that I'll do everything right and you'll still choose fear over me. That I'll spend the rest of my life knowing my fated mate existed and wanted nothing to do with me. That I'll grow old alone, always wondering what we might have been. The honesty in his words undid her. I can't survive losing you, she whispered. You don't know that you'll lose me. I lost Callum. Callum made his choice. A brave choice, a noble choice, but his choice nonetheless. I'm still here. I'm still fighting. Not for glory or honor, but for this. He placed her hand over his heart, for the chance at something real. She felt his heartbeat against her palm, strong and steady and alive. Felt her own heart trying to match its rhythm. 29 days, she said. You have 29 days. Then I'll make every one of them count. He released her wrist, stepped back, gave her space to breathe, and somehow that the fact that he could let her go, even when he clearly wanted to hold on somehow, that reached her more than any declaration could have. The discovery came on day 30. Kira had decided to visit Callum's grave, something she'd been avoiding for months. The cemetery sat at the edge of packlands, quiet and carefully tended. She walked between the headstones with flowers in hand, rehearsing the words she'd never been able to say. Then she saw Darius. He was kneeling at Callum's grave, so focused on what he was doing that he hadn't heard her approach. In his hands, a small, carved wolf, intricate, beautiful, clearly made with care. He set it gently among the other offerings at the base of the headstone. Kira froze hidden behind a large oak, watching. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, Darius said quietly. His voice carried in the still air, raw with grief Kira had never suspected. I tried. Gods, I tried. When you volunteered for that mission, I ordered you to stand down. Pulled rank. But you went anyway, said those civilians deserve someone willing to die for them. He bowed his head, shoulders shaking slightly. I carried your body home myself. Wouldn't let anyone else touch you. Wrote to Kira, tried to explain, but she never responded. Never opened the letters. I don't blame her. How do you tell a woman her husband died a hero when all she wanted was for him to come home? Kira's breath caught. Letters. What letters? And now? Darius's laugh was bitter, broken. Now I'm falling for your wife. Your fierce, brilliant, damaged wife who looks at me like I'm the enemy. And maybe I am. Maybe I should have died in that war instead of coming back here to complicate her grief. But Callum, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm not you. I'm sorry I fell in love with her. I'm sorry I couldn't save you so you could have the life with her that I'm desperately hoping she'll give me. He stood slowly, touched the headstone with reverence, and walked away without seeing her. Kira waited until his footsteps faded. Then she approached the grave on trembling legs. The carved wolf was exquisite, a masterwork of patience and skill. And it wasn't the only one. There were others weathered by time, monthly offerings stretching back 3 years. He'd been visiting all along. The flowers slipped from her nerveless fingers. She sank to her knees beside her husband's grave, seeing it all clearly for the first time. Darius hadn't commanded Callum to die, had tried to stop him, had mourned him, had carried that guilt for 3 years while she nursed her hatred. I didn't know, she whispered to the headstone. I thought he sent you to die. I thought he was another war-hungry leader who spent lives like coins. I was wrong. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees. If she let herself believe in signs, she could almost imagine it was Callum's voice whispering, finally, finally, you see. She stayed there until sunset, talking to her dead husband the way she hadn't been able to in years. Telling him about Darius, about the fear, about the impossible choice, asking forgiveness for things she'd done and things she was considering doing. When she finally stood, her legs cramped and her eyes swollen from crying, she knew what she had to do. The fortress was settling into evening routines when she found Bryn in the kitchens, stealing bread from the cooling racks. I need to ask you something, Kira said. Her sister turned, bread in hand, eyes widening at whatever she saw in Kira's expression. Are you okay? 3 years ago when Callum died, did any letters arrive for me, official ones from the Alpha's command? Bryn's face shuddered. Why are you asking? Please, it's important. A long pause, then quietly. I burned them. The world tilted. You what? You were destroyed, Bryn said defensively. Not eating, not sleeping, just staring at walls. I was 16 and terrified, and those letters were from him, from the man whose war killed our Callum. I thought reading them would make it worse, so I... Her voice broke. I burned them. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Kira pulled her sister into a fierce embrace. It's okay. You were protecting me. I wasn't protecting you. I was being a stupid kid who thought she could control your pain. Bryn pulled back, wiping her eyes. What was in them? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. She found Darius in his study, surrounded by maps and reports. He looked up when she entered, surprise and hope warring in his expression. Kira, I didn't expect... The letters, she said. The ones you sent after Callum died. I never got them. Bryn burned them, trying to protect me. She swallowed hard. I need to know what they said. Darius stood slowly, crossed to a locked cabinet. From it, he withdrew a bundle of letters tied with string. She recognized his handwriting on the unopened envelopes. "I kept copies," he said quietly, "in case you ever wanted them." Her hands shook as she took the bundle. There were 5 letters spanning the 3 months after Callum's death. The first was an official notification, cold and formal, but the second began, "My deepest condolences for your loss. I wish these words could ease your pain, but I know they cannot. Callum Ashford was one of the finest men I've ever known. He volunteered for a mission I tried to forbid him from taking. 32 civilians owed their lives to his sacrifice. He spoke of you often with love and pride and a joy that made the rest of us jealous. In his final moments, he asked me to tell you 3 things." Kira couldn't read through the tears, couldn't see the words for the grief and rage and terrible understanding washing over her. "He died saving others," she managed. "Not because you ordered him to. I tried to stop him. He defied my command." Darius's voice was gentle. "I've carried that guilt ever since, that I couldn't protect him, that I brought him to that war in the first place. It wasn't your fault. Tell my conscience that. I've been arguing with it for 3 years." Kira looked up at him, this man she'd hated, then resisted, then slowly, terrifyingly begun to care for. The last letter. What were Callum's 3 things? Darius's throat worked. "Are you sure you want to know?" "I need to know." He crossed to her, carefully took the 3rd letter from the bundle and read aloud, "Tell Kira I loved her more than breathing. Tell her I'm sorry I won't grow old with her. And tell her," his voice cracked slightly, "tell her not to let grief kill her too. She deserves to love again, to laugh again, to be happy. She's too fierce to fade away. Make sure she lives, please. Make sure she lives." The words landed like arrows, each one piercing the armor she'd built. Callum had given her permission, had asked someone to make sure she lived, had asked Darius. "You've been trying to honor his request," she whispered. "I've been trying to honor him, and failing because you look at me like I'm the enemy, when all I want—" He stopped, shook his head. "It doesn't matter what I want. You have 1 day left. If you still want me gone—" "I don't." The words came out before she could stop them, soft, certain. "What? I don't want you gone." She met his eyes, saw the hope flaring there. "I'm still afraid. I'm still broken. I'm probably going to be difficult and angry and impossible, but I don't want you to leave." "Kira, let me finish." She took a shaking breath. "I loved Callum with everything I had. That doesn't end just because he's gone, but maybe there's room for something else. Something different. Not a replacement, but a new beginning." Darius closed the distance between them, slowly giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face with infinite gentleness. "I'm not asking you to forget him," he said. "I'm asking you to let yourself live, the way he wanted you to, the way you deserve to. I don't know how anymore. Then we'll figure it out together." The kiss was soft, tentative, dumb, nothing like the passion she'd shared with Callum, but something quieter, steadier, a promise instead of a flame. When they pulled apart, Kira rested her forehead against his. "1 day until the deadline. We can announce it at the council meeting tomorrow if you're ready." "I'm not ready, but I'm choosing this anyway." His smile was brilliant and heartbreaking all at once. "That's all I'm asking." But neither of them knew that the hardest trials were still to come. That fate had more to demand of them than a simple choice. That sometimes love required more than just saying yes, it required surviving everything that came after. The council chamber felt different the next morning. Or perhaps Kira was the one who'd changed. She sat in her usual seat, hyper-aware of Darius 3 places down the curved table, hyper-aware of the way Isolde watched them both with knowing eyes, the way Tamsin smiled into her tea, the way even the morning light seemed sharper, more alive. The weight of the letters still pressed against her chest, she'd tucked them into her jacket before leaving her quarters. Physical proof that everything she'd believed for 3 years had been built on incomplete information. Grief and rage and loneliness constructed on a foundation of missing truth. Elder Miriam called the meeting to order, her ancient voice carrying the weight of ritual and routine. Trade disputes, border patrols, harvest projections, the mundane business of keeping a pack alive and functioning. Kira barely heard any of it. Her eyes kept drifting to Darius, to the way his hands moved when he spoke, precise, controlled, never wasted motion. To the scar along his jaw that she'd once seen as a badge of the war that took Callum, but now recognized as evidence that Darius had been fighting too, had been bleeding too, had come home damaged in ways that didn't show. "Weapons Master Ashford." She startled, realized Broderick Thorne was addressing her. The older counselor sat rigid in his seat, jaw set in its familiar expression of disapproval. My apologies, counselor. Could you repeat the question? I said the new recruits need evaluation. Your assessment is overdue by a week. Guilt flickered through her. He was right. She'd been so consumed by the 30-day courtship, by grief and confusion and unwelcome hope that her duties had slipped. You're correct. I'll have the evaluations completed by week's end. See that you do. Broderick's tone carried an edge. Some of us maintain our responsibilities regardless of personal distractions. The barb landed exactly where he'd aimed it. Before Kira could respond, Darius spoke. His voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable current of authority. Counselor Thorne, if you have concerns about the weapons master's performance, address them directly rather than through implication. We're not children passing notes in the schoolyard. Broderick's face flushed. I meant no disrespect, my lord, simply stating facts. Facts would include that Mistress Ashford has trained more successful warriors in 3 years than the previous weapons master managed in 20, that our defensive capabilities have improved 40% under her leadership, that she works longer hours than anyone in this fortress except possibly you. Darius's eyes never left Broderick's face. So yes, if her evaluations are delayed by a week while she deals with significant personal matters, I'm willing to extend that grace. Are you? Silence fell across the chamber. Kira felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Not the desperate, consuming heat she'd felt with Callum, but something steadier, safer. The warmth of being defended, of being seen. Broderick inclined his head stiffly. Of course, my lord. The meeting continued, but Kira's attention had fractured completely. She found herself studying Darius with new eyes, seeing the leader instead of the enemy. The man who'd carried her husband's body home and mourned him at his grave. The man who'd waited 3 years for a chance she'd almost refused to give. When the council finally adjourned, she caught him in the corridor outside. Thank you, she said, for defending me in there. I was stating facts, not defending. His smile was gentle, though I'll admit the delivery was perhaps more pointed than strictly necessary. Broderick's not wrong. I have been distracted. You're allowed to be human, Kira, allowed to have a life beyond duty. He reached out, then seemed to think better of it, hand falling back to his side. The world won't end if you take time for yourself. She caught his hand before it dropped completely, threaded her fingers through his, felt his sharp intake of breath. Walk with me, she asked. They walked through the fortress gardens where spring was staging its annual battle against winter's lingering grip. Crocuses pushed through half-frozen soil. Early buds swelled on the fruit trees, everything reaching toward warmth, toward light, toward the promise of something better coming. I need to tell you something, Kira said. Darius tensed slightly but didn't pull away. I'm listening. Yesterday at the cemetery, I heard what you said to Callum. She felt him freeze. About trying to save him, about the letters, about falling for me despite everything. Kira, I didn't mean for you to. I know, that's what made it real. She stopped walking, turned to face him. I've been so angry for so long. Angry at you at the war, at fate itself for taking him. But you were just as hurt, just as lost. And I never saw it because I was too busy building walls. You had every right to those walls. Maybe, but they were keeping out the wrong person. She squeezed his hand. I'm ready, Darius, not just to accept the courtship, but to actually try, to let you in, to see where this goes without my grief standing between us. His eyes searched hers, looking for certainty, for truth. You're sure? Fear still gnaws at me, but yes, I'm sure. He pulled her close, then wrapped her in arms that felt like safety and promise and home. She breathed him in pine and leather, in something uniquely his, and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could survive wanting this. There's something I want to show you, he said against her hair. He led her to the training yard, but instead of the archery range, he took her to the weapons forge, retrieved a package wrapped in soft cloth. I made this for you, he said, suddenly uncertain. I'm no craftsman, but I wanted you to have something from me that wasn't just borrowed. She unwrapped the cloth to find a knife. Simple, elegant, perfectly balanced. The handle was carved with intricate wolves running through forest hours of patient work. It's beautiful, she whispered. I worked on it at night, after everyone else was asleep, when I couldn't stop thinking about you. He watched her face anxiously. If you don't like it, she kissed him. It was different than their first kiss. Deeper, more certain. A claiming and a surrender, all at once. His hands came up to cradle her face like she was something precious, unbreakable, even as his mouth moved against hers with barely controlled need. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. "Teach me," she said. "Teach me how to do this, how to love again, without the constant dread that I'll lose you too." "I don't know how to promise you that." "Then promise me you'll try. Promise me you'll fight. That's all I need. I promise." They stood there in the golden morning light, holding each other, while around them the pack went about its daily business. And for the first time in 3 years, Kira felt like she was part of the world again, instead of just haunting its edges. The demonstration was supposed to be routine. 2 days later, day 32 of the courtship period, with just over a week until the Crimson Moon, Kira ran her usual training session for the younger wolves, teaching them combat techniques, defensive formations, the difference between fighting to kill and fighting to protect. Usually it was organized chaos, carefully controlled with her watching every movement to prevent accidents. Today started no differently. 15 young wolves gathered in the practice yard ranging from 12 to 19 years old. Finnegan, the smallest, newest orphan the pack had taken in 6 months ago, stood at the back trying to look confident in failing. The boy had lost his parents to a Borderlands raid, had been found half-starved, barely able to shift, traumatized into near muteness. Kira had a soft spot for him, saw too much of her own grief reflected in his haunted eyes. "Today, we're working on controlled shifts," she announced. "The key is maintaining awareness even when the wolf takes over. Your human mind and wolf instincts need to work together, not fight for dominance." She demonstrated, letting her wolf rise just enough that her eyes flashed gold, her canines extended power rippling beneath her skin. Then she pulled it back, controlled and smooth. "Now you try, slow and careful. If you feel control slipping, step back, breathe, center yourself." The young wolves began their attempts. Some managed partial shifts, claws extending, eyes changing color. Others struggled, their transformations jerky and incomplete. Finnegan stood, frozen fear written across his young face. "It's all right," Kira said, gently approaching him. "There's no pressure. Take your time." "I can't," he whispered. "What if I lose control again?" "Then I'll be here to help you find it." She kept her voice calm, reassuring. "You're safe, Finnegan. I won't let anything happen." He nodded, took a shaking breath, and reached for his wolf. It happened too fast. One moment he was tentatively calling his shift. The next his wolf exploded outward in a frenzy of panic and primal fear. Eyes gone completely feral, reason drowned in instinct. He lunged at Kira with a snarl, claws extended, aiming for her throat. She had time to think. "He's just scared. Don't hurt him." Then something else rose up from deep in her chest, something vast and primal and utterly irresistible. It burst from her throat as a single word, but it carried the weight of mountains, the authority of ancient bloodlines, the undeniable command of an alpha. Enough. The word didn't just echo, it resonated. It pressed against every wolf in the training yard with physical force, dropping them to their knees in automatic submission. Finnegan crashed to the ground mid-lunge, his shift reversing violently, leaving him gasping, inhuman, and terrified on the packed earth. Silence fell like a hammer. Kira stood frozen, feeling power still crackling under her skin, searching for ground. Her hands shook, her heart hammered against her ribs, and every single wolf in the yard, young and old alike, was staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to fear. "What?" Finnegan's voice was barely a whisper. "What was that?" She didn't have an answer, didn't understand what had just happened. She'd shouted commands before, had the authority of weapons master to enforce discipline. But this had been something else, something that bypassed choice entirely and compelled obedience at a level she didn't recognize. "Training is over," she managed. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, layered with an echo she'd never heard before. Everyone dismissed. "Finnegan, stay a moment." The others fled, casting nervous glances over their shoulders. Finnegan remained on the ground, head bowed in submission he clearly couldn't control. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to attack you. The wolf just took over and I couldn't stop it, and—" "Hey." Kira knelt beside him, gentle, despite the power still humming through her veins. "You're not in trouble. That's what training is for, learning, control in a safe space. But I need you to look at me." He raised his eyes slowly. They were wet with tears, terrified of rejection. "You did nothing wrong," she said firmly. "Your wolf was scared, that's understandable. But we're going to work on this together, all right, slowly, carefully, until you feel safe in your own skin again." "But what you did, that command," he swallowed hard. "Only alphas can do that. Force submission like that. Are you—" "I don't know what I am." But Isolde did. The older woman found Kira an hour later in the armory, where she'd retreated to process what had happened. Kira was mechanically cleaning weapons that didn't need cleaning, trying to make sense of the power still simmering beneath her skin. Alpha voice, Isolde said without preamble. That's what you manifested today. Kira's hand stilled on the sword she'd been polishing. That's impossible. I'm not an alpha. Your bloodline says otherwise. Isolde settled onto the workbench, fixing Kira with a sharp gaze. Your grandmother, your mother's mother, was Mora Thornheart, from the mountain packs. She carried the alpha gene, though it never manifested in her. Sometimes it skips generations, lies dormant until stress or trauma triggers the awakening. Emotional trauma, Kira repeated flatly. Like losing a mate. Like 3 years of grief so intense it nearly destroyed you. Like falling in love again and being terrified of the vulnerability. Like watching a child in danger and absolutely needing to protect him. Isolde's voice gentled. Your wolf was trying to surface all along, child. You just kept pushing it down along with everything else you felt. Kira sat heavily, sword forgotten. What does this mean? It means you are more powerful than anyone suspected. Female alphas are rare, haven't seen one in these territories for 3 generations. But they're not forbidden, just unexpected. Broderick will oppose this. Broderick opposes change in general. It's his nature. Isolde smiled slightly. But the council can't deny what half the pack witnessed today. You'll need to be tested, of course. Prove you can control it. But Kira, this is a gift, not a curse. It doesn't feel like a gift. Power never does at first. It feels like responsibility you never asked for. The older woman's expression turned distant. My mate was an alpha. I saw what that weight did to him, the constant awareness of others depending on him, looking to him for strength. But I also saw what he did with it. How he protected, guided, built something lasting. You can do the same. Kira looked down at her hands, the same hands that had just compelled submission from 15 wolves without conscious thought. Does Darius know? He was in the War Council chamber when it happened. But I imagine he felt it. All alphas can sense when another manifests nearby. He'll be here soon if I know anything about fated mates. As if summoned by the words, Darius appeared in the doorway. His eyes found Kira, immediately searching her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Are you all right? He asked. I'm not sure what I am. He crossed to her in 3 long strides, pulled her up and into his arms. She went without resistance, letting him anchor her while the world tilted on its axis. I felt it, he murmured against her hair. The surge of power. Thought something was attacking, came running. Then Isolde told me what happened, and He pulled back to look at her. You're magnificent. I'm scared. You can be both. His smile was tender. You think I wasn't terrified the first time my alpha voice manifested? I was 14 and accidentally compelled my entire family to freeze during an argument. My father laughed himself sick once the shock wore off. Despite everything, Kira felt her lips twitch. That must have been quite the family dinner. It was memorable. He cupped her face gently. This changes nothing between us. If anything, it makes us more compatible, 2 alphas building something together instead of fighting for dominance. Broderick won't see it that way. Then we'll change his mind. Together. Isolde cleared her throat delicately. Actually, the council is requesting an emergency session tonight to discuss recent developments. Kira's stomach dropped. Already? Word travels fast in a pack. Half the fortress knows what happened by now. The council needs to address it before rumors spiral. Isolde's gaze was steady. But you have allies, child. More than you know. The council chamber felt like a tribunal. Every seat was filled, and wolves lined the walls, pack members demanding to witness this unprecedented moment. Kira stood before them all, hyper-aware of the eyes judging her, weighing her, trying to decide if she was threat or asset. Darius stood beside her. Not in front, not behind, beside. A united front. Elder Miriam called for order, her ancient voice cutting through the murmurs. We gathered to address the manifestation of Alpha bloodline in Weapons Master Kira Ashford. This assembly will hear testimony, review historical precedent, and vote on recognition of her power. Broderick rose immediately. I move that we table this discussion entirely. Female alphas are aberrations. Historical records prove otherwise, Isolde interrupted. She stood in the back, arms crossed, radiating quiet authority. I've spent the afternoon in the archives. There are 7 documented cases of female alphas in the Northern Territories alone over the past 5 centuries. All were powerful leaders. All contributed significantly to their packs. 7 in 500 years, Broderick countered. Hardly common, hardly natural. Hardly common doesn't mean unnatural. Tamsin spoke up from her seat. Plenty of rare things are still legitimate. Your grandson is a healer, only the third born with that gift in the 60 years. Do we call him unnatural? Broderick's face flushed. That's different. How? Darius's question was quiet but sharp. How is one rare gift different from another? Because one fits your expectations and the other challenges them. Because Alpha's lead. If she's truly alpha-blooded, she could challenge your authority, my lord. Create division. Civil war has started over less. The murmurs grew louder. Kira felt the weight of fear spreading through the room. Fear of change, of upset traditions, of a future that looked different than the past. She stepped forward, and her movement alone was enough to quiet the chamber. The alpha presence that she didn't fully understand yet was already changing how people responded to her. Counselor Thorne raises a valid concern, she said. Her voice was steady, carrying to every corner of the room. Power without accountability is dangerous, so let me be clear. I have no desire to challenge Darius for leadership, no interest in dividing this pack. I didn't ask for this gift, didn't seek it, but I won't apologize for it either. She met Broderick's eyes directly. You're right that I'm rare, right that I'm unexpected, but I've proven my loyalty to this pack every day for 3 years. Trained your warriors, protected your borders, bled for the safety of wolves I've never even met. Her voice hardened slightly. So if you want to reject me based on fear of what I might become, instead of recognition of what I've already done, then go ahead and call that vote. But know that you're choosing prejudice over pragmatism. Silence fell. Elder Miriam's eyes glinted with something that might have been approval. Well said. The chair recognizes Counselor Greymantle. Isolde stepped forward. I've lived 6 decades and seen plenty of change, some good, some bad. But I've learned that refusing to adapt is a slower death than taking risks. She looked around the chamber. This young woman saved 15 cubs today with that alpha voice. Prevented what could have been a tragedy. That's not a threat, that's protection. Exactly what we need. I support recognition, Tamsin added immediately. And I move that we vote tonight. No delays, no committees. Either we trust our weapons master or we don't. The murmurs returned, but Kira could sense the tide shifting. Saw doubt creeping into hostile faces. Saw others nodding, slowly reconsidering. Darius spoke last. I won't pretend this doesn't complicate things. 2 alphas in 1 pack is unprecedented in our lifetime. But I've seen what Kira can do. Seen her strength, her control, her commitment to protecting others. If anything, having dual alphas makes us stronger, gives us capabilities no other pack possesses. He turned to face her, and his eyes held nothing but certainty. I support full recognition, and I propose we begin working on protocols for dual alpha leadership immediately. Elder Miriam raised her hand, all in favor of recognizing Kira Ashford's alpha bloodline and granting her full rights and responsibilities thereof. Hands rose around the chamber. Kira counted them hard in her throat. 9 votes in favor, 3 against Broderick, and 2 older counselors. Motion passes, Miriam declared. Let it be recorded that this pack recognizes Alpha Kira Ashford and welcomes the strength she brings. The chamber erupted in mixed reactions, some cheering, others grumbling, most simply looking stunned by the rapid change. Kira felt Darius's hand find hers squeezed gently, felt Isolde's proud gaze from across the room, felt the weight of responsibility settling onto shoulders that had been carrying grief for so long they'd almost forgotten what purpose felt like. But beneath the weight was something else. Hope. 2 days later, in 34, 1 week before the Crimson Moon, Broderick Thorne appeared at Kira's quarters before dawn. She answered the door, wary, half expecting confrontation. Instead, the older counselor stood with stiff posture and an expression that looked like swallowing glass. May I speak with you? He asked formally. Of course. She stepped aside, led him into the small sitting room. Would you like tea? No, this won't take long. He remained standing, jaw tight. I owe you an apology and an explanation. Kira waited, sensing this needed to unfold at his pace. My mate died 30 years ago in childbirth. Broderick began, his voice carefully controlled. Our daughter survived, strong, fierce, brilliant. She reminded me of you. Had that same fire, that same stubborn refusal to back down. He crossed to the window, stared out at the pre-dawn fortress. She manifested as a healer when she was 17. Rare gift, powerful. But the pack elders at the time feared her power. Said it was unnatural for someone so young to have such ability. Exile was suggested. His hands clenched at his sides. She chose to leave rather than divide the pack, to spare me the choice between her and my position on the council. I'm so sorry, Kira whispered. She died 2 years later, alone in some foreign territory, because I didn't fight hard enough to make them see reason, because I let fear and tradition matter more than my own daughter. He turned back to her, and his eyes were wet. When you manifested, all I could see was history repeating, another powerful woman being feared instead of celebrated. And I became what I hated most, the elder, suggesting rejection based on fear instead of merit. Kira crossed to him, put a gentle hand on his arm. You weren't wrong to worry about division. That's a legitimate concern for any leader. But it's not more important than doing what's right. He covered her hand with his. You remind me of my Marielle. She would have liked you, would have been proud to see you stand up for yourself the way she never got the chance to. What was her gift as a healer? She could sense sickness before it manifested, saved dozens of lives by catching illnesses early. The pack would have been better with her, stronger, but we drove her away because we were too afraid of change. His voice roughened. I won't make that mistake again. Kira felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you for telling me this. I have a proposal, Broderick said, his tone shifting to something more formal, to prove my sincerity and give you a chance to demonstrate your capability to the remaining doubters. Oh, the hunt of the white stag. It's an ancient trial used historically to test new alphas. Ceremonial tracking through the northern forests requires leadership strategy and the ability to work with a team under pressure. His expression turned serious. I formally challenge you to undertake it, not to humiliate you, to give you a platform to prove your worth beyond any doubt. Kira considered. The hunt was legendary, an all-day tracking expedition that tested every skill an alpha needed. It hadn't been invoked in decades. When, she asked? Tomorrow. Day 35. You'll lead a party of 5, myself included, if you'll have me. We track the sacred markers through the forest, overcome whatever obstacles arise, and return together before sunset. And if I fail, then I'll have legitimate grounds to oppose dual leadership. He met her eyes. But if you succeed, I'll become your strongest ally on the council. More than that, I'll work to honor my daughter's memory by making sure this pack never again rejects someone for being extraordinary. You have my word. She extended her hand. I accept. They shook on it, and Kira saw the ghost of approval in his eyes. Saw a man trying to honor his daughter's memory by being better than fear allowed. Maybe that was all any of them could do. The morning of the hunt dawned cold and gray. Kira stood at the forest's edge with her party, Broderick, as old as Tamsin, and young Lyric, a promising tracker, barely 20 years old. Darius had wanted to come but understood that this was her trial, not his. She could feel his anxiety through the bond they'd begun to form, even though it wasn't complete yet. The rules are simple, Broderick explained. We track the sacred deer markings through the forest. Stay together. Overcome whatever obstacles arise. Return by sunset. Leadership is tested not by dominance, but by how you protect and guide your team. Understood. Kira adjusted her pack. Everyone ready? Nods all around. They entered the forest as the sun crept above the horizon. The first hours passed smoothly. Kira found the trail markers easily, ancient symbols carved into trees, subtle disturbances in the undergrowth. She kept them moving at a steady pace, checking in with each member, making sure no one fell behind. Isolde moved with surprising grace for her age. Tamsin joked to keep spirits light. Lyric absorbed everything like a sponge. And Broderick watched Kira with assessing eyes, looking for weakness or strength. She gave him only strength. They stopped for a brief meal at midday, crouched beside a stream that ran swift and cold with snowmelt. You're doing well, Isolde murmured to Kira. Natural leadership. I just don't want anyone getting hurt. That's what makes you a good leader. You care more about their safety than your own glory. They resumed the trail, pushing deeper into the forest. The markers led them upward into rockier terrain where the trees grew sparse and the wind picked up. Then the weather turned. It started as distant thunder. Within minutes, the sky opened up in a deluge that transformed the forest floor into slick mud. The stream they'd eaten beside swelled rapidly, brown water roaring over its banks. We need to find shelter, Kira shouted over the rain. But the trail markers led forward across what had been a gentle creek crossing. Now it was a churning rapids waist deep and rising fast. We can't cross that, Tamsin said, eyeing the water with concern. We have to, Lyric argued. The trial requires following the full trail. The trial requires returning alive, Kira countered, which won't happen if we get swept away. She scanned the area, tactical mind working. Upstream, a fallen tree bridged the water, narrow, slippery, but possible. Downstream, the current looked slower, but the crossing was wider. There, she pointed to the tree. Single file. I'll go first, test if it holds. Then Lyric Tamsin Isolde Broderick bringing up rear. You should go last, Broderick said. Leader secures the rear. Leader tests the danger first. I won't ask anyone to do what I won't. She started toward the fallen tree before he could argue. The bark was slick under her feet. The tree swayed with her weight, and the roaring water beneath seemed to pull at her hungry. Kira forced herself to breathe, to move slowly, to trust her balance. Halfway across, the tree shifted. She froze, arms extended for balance. Below, the water churned and frothed, full of debris and sharp rocks. Kira, Tamsin's voice carried from the bank. I'm fine, just need to... The tree shifted again, and this time she heard the crack of wood giving way. Then she was falling. The water hit like a fist, cold and brutal. Current grabbed her, spun her, dragged her under. She fought to surface, to breathe, but the rapids were too strong, pulling her downstream in a tumbling chaos. Rocks slammed into her ribs. Branches scraped her face. She caught a glimpse of sky-gulped air, then went under again. Her hand caught something solid, a root extending from the bank. She held on with everything she had, fighting the current that wanted to tear her away. Kira, Broderick's voice close now, grab my hand. She looked up, saw him lying on the bank, arm extended. Saw Isolde and Tamsin holding his legs to anchor him. Saw Lyric already in the water upstream, creating a human chain. Kira let go of the root with one hand, reached for Broderick. Their fingers touched, clasped. I've got you, he gritted out. Don't let go. Between all of them pulling, they dragged her from the water. She collapsed on the bank, coughing up river water, ribs screaming from the impacts. That, she gasped, was not in the trial description. Tamsin laughed, high and slightly hysterical. You're insane. You know that Alpha Voice won't help you if you're dead, Isolde added, but her relief was obvious. Broderick sat back on his heels, breathing hard. You could have died. But I didn't, because my team saved me. Kira pushed herself up despite her screaming muscles. That's what the trial is about, isn't it? Not individual strength, team strength, trusting each other. Something shifted in Broderick's expression. Understanding. Respect. Yes, that's exactly what it's about. Then we're not done. We have a trail to finish. They found a safer crossing downstream. Made it to the final marker just as sunset painted the sky golden crimson. Returned to the fortress, battered, exhausted, and completely unified. Darius met them at the gates, and the relief on his face when he saw Kyra alive nearly broke her. He pulled her into his arms despite the watching crowd, held her like he'd never let go. Never again, he murmured. Never scare me like that again. I survived. Barely. But I did. We did. Together. That night, the council formally recognized her successful completion of the hunt. Broderick stood and declared his support for dual alpha leadership, his voice carrying the weight of a man honoring his daughter's memory by doing what he should have done 30 years ago. And when Kira returned to her quarters, bruised and exhausted, she found Darius waiting. I thought I lost you today, he said quietly. I'm right here. I know, but Kira, I need to tell you something. Before this goes any further, before the Crimson Moon ceremony in 6 days, before I lose my courage. He took her hands and she felt them trembling. I'm not going to live forever. None of us are. No, I mean there's something wrong. Has been since the Borderlands. He met her eyes and she saw fear there. Real raw fear. I'm dying. The world tilted. What? A curse wound, an enchanted blade that's been slowly draining my life force for 3 years. I've been hiding it, managing it, but... His voice broke slightly. The healers give me maybe 5 more years. Less if I keep pushing myself. Kira pulled her hands free, stepped back. Panic clawed at her throat. You're telling me this now? After everything. After I finally opened my heart again. I know it's not fair, but I couldn't let you bond with me without knowing the truth. Tears tracked down his face. I love you too much to lie to you. She wanted to rage, wanted to run, wanted to scream at the unfairness of fate offering her love and loss in the same breath, but instead she stepped forward, cupped his face in her hands and kissed him fiercely. Then we'll find a cure, she said against his mouth. Together. There is no cure. There's always a cure, we just haven't found it yet. She pulled back to look at him. Where did this happen? Where were you wounded? Silver Peak Mountains, during the final battle. Her breath caught. Silver Peak, where Callum had died. Then that's where we'll go, she said. Back to where this started. We'll find answers. Kira, it's too dangerous, too painful for you. I'm not losing you, not without a fight. Her voice turned hard with determination. You promised me you'd try. You promised me you'd fight. So we're going to Silver Peak, and we're going to find whatever magic or herb or miracle it takes to save you. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed her again, desperate and grateful and terrified. And when they made love that night, it was with the urgency of people who understood that time was the most precious gift of all. Later, as dawn crept through the windows and Darius slept beside her, Kira stared at the ceiling and made a vow. She'd lost Callum to Silver Peak. She would not lose Darius there too. Whatever it took, whoever she had to become, she would save him. Or die trying. The journey to Silver Peak Mountains would take 3 days at hard riding. 3 days through territories that grew progressively wilder, more remote, more haunted by memories Kira had spent 3 years trying to forget. 3 days to prepare herself for returning to the place where her first love had bled out on frozen ground, while she slept peacefully at home, unaware that her world was ending. 3 days to save her second love from the same fate. They left at dawn on day 37, Kira, Bryn, Isolde, Tamsin, and Nephili the healer. 5 days until the crimson moon. 5 days to find a cure return and bind themselves in the ceremony that would either save Darius or prove Isolde's theory wrong. Darius had wanted to come despite his weakening condition, but Kiera had kissed him and made him promise to rest, to save his strength for the ceremony. She could feel him through their nascent bond, not complete yet, but growing stronger each day. Felt his fear, his love, his desperate hope that she'd return in time. The first day of travel passed in tense silence. They rode through familiar packlands, past farms and villages, where people waved and called blessings. But Kiera barely noticed. Her mind was already ahead, climbing into mountains she'd sworn never to see again. Bryn rode beside her, young and determined and trying so hard to be strong. Her sister had insisted on coming, despite Kira's protests. "You saved me when Mom and Dad died," Bryn had said. "Let me help save him." The girl, no young woman, Kira corrected herself, had grown so much in 3 years. 19 now, with their mother's eyes and their father's stubborn chin. Old enough to understand grief. Old enough to choose courage over fear. "Tell me about Callum," Bryn said as they rode. "The real stories, not the sanitized ones everyone shares at memorial services." Kira glanced at her sister, surprised. "Wipe hustom, because I was 16 when he died. Too young to really know him as a person, not just my sister's husband. And if we're going to where he..." She swallowed. "I want to understand what we're honoring." So Kira told her about meeting Callum at 23, fresh from her first year as a junior weapons instructor, how he'd stumbled into her archery demonstration, tripped over his own feet, trying to impress her, and somehow made her laugh despite the embarrassment. How he'd courted her with wildflowers and terrible poetry, and a joy so infectious it had pulled her out of the serious, controlled person she'd been trying to become. He was chaos, Kira said, and found herself smiling at the memory. But the good kind, the kind that reminds you life is supposed to be messy and unpredictable and full of laughter. He made me better by making me lighter. You loved him. Completely. The way you love the first person who teaches you that you're capable of that much feeling. That your heart can expand to hold another person so fully that they become part of you. Bryn was quiet for a moment. Then, and Darius? Darius is different, and not better or worse, just different. Kira searched for the right words. Callum was summer, bright and warm and burning fast. Darius is autumn, steady and deep and built to last. I love them differently because they're different people. And I'm different now too. You're allowed to love them both, you know. At the same time, in different ways. The simple wisdom of it struck Kira like a bell. She'd spent 3 years treating love like a finite resource, as if loving Darius meant diminishing what she'd felt for Callum. But Bryn was right. The heart didn't work that way. It expanded. It held multitudes. "When did you get so wise?" Kira asked. "I had a good teacher," Bryn grinned, even if she was too stubborn to see it herself. By the second day, the landscape had changed. They'd left the rolling hills and cultivated fields behind, entering the wild territories where human settlement gave way to ancient forest. The trees here grew massive and old, their canopies blocking out so much sunlight that the forest floor existed in perpetual twilight, moss draped from branches like tattered banners. Strange bird calls echoed through the shadows. This was where the borderlands began, where civilization ended and the lawless spaces took over. Isolde rode up beside Kira as they navigated a narrow trail between towering pines. "You're tensing up," the older woman observed, breathing shallow, body preparing for threat. "Can you blame me? This place?" Kira gestured at the oppressive forest. "This is where everything went wrong. No, this is where Callum made a choice. where he chose to save others at the cost of himself. That's not wrong. That's heroic. Isolde's voice was gentle but firm. You're confusing the place with the pain. They're not the same thing. It feels the same. I know, when my mate died, I couldn't go near the healer's quarter for 2 years. The smell of medicinal herbs made me sick. But eventually I learned that avoiding reminders doesn't heal the wound, it just keeps it from closing properly. They rode in silence for a while. Then Isolde spoke again, softer this time. You know what I think? I think you're not just scared of this place. You're scared of what you might feel when you face it. Scared that confronting where Callum died might somehow betray Darius. Or that honoring Callum's memory might mean you don't love Darius enough. The words hit too close to truth. What if I break? Kira whispered. What if I get there and the grief overwhelms me and I fall apart and we fail and Darius dies because I wasn't strong enough? Then we'll pick you up, put you back together, and keep moving. That's what family does. Isolde reached over to squeeze Kira's hand briefly. But you won't break. You're stronger than you think. Stronger than grief, stronger than fear. You just need to believe it. Kira wanted to believe, wanted to trust in her own resilience. But doubt was a persistent companion whispering that she'd only survived the last 3 years by not feeling, and now she was riding straight back into the epicenter of all that carefully buried pain. They camped that night in a clearing beside a stream. Tamsin built a fire while Nefeli checked their supplies. Bryn helped prepare a simple meal, and Kira sat apart staring into the flames trying to prepare herself for what was coming. Nefeli joined her after dinner, settling onto the log beside her with the quiet grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime observing others. The moon petal lotus grows in places of great sacrifice, the healer said without preamble, where life force has been spilled with pure intention, where death has meaning instead of just waste. You think we'll find it? I think if anywhere in these mountains holds that flower, it's where your Callum fell. Nefeli's dark eyes reflected the firelight. But Kira, you need to understand, even if we find it, the cure may not be simple. Curse wounds are tricky. They adapt, resist, fight back. The lotus might suppress Darius's curse, might even reverse it partially, but full healing will require what? I don't know, that's what worries me. The healer sighed. Magic always demands a price. Just be prepared for whatever that price might be. Kira nodded, though unease coiled in her stomach. I'll pay it, whatever it costs. Even if the cost is saying goodbye to Callum, really truly letting him go. The question hung in the air between them. Kira looked up at the stars emerging through the forest canopy. Somewhere up there, if the old beliefs held true, Callum's spirit watched. She wanted to think he'd understand, that he'd want her to choose life, choose love, choose the future instead of clinging to the past. But a small, fearful part of her worried that moving forward was the same as forgetting. I don't know how to let go without losing him completely, she admitted. You don't lose people by letting go, Nefeli said gently. You honor them. You keep what mattered, the lessons, the love, the ways they changed you, and release the pain. That's not forgetting, that's healing. They reached Silver Peak on the afternoon of the third day, day 39, 3 days before the crimson moon. The mountains rose before them like jagged teeth biting into the sky, snow-capped peaks gleaming in the thin sunlight. The air was colder here, sharp enough to burn the lungs. And somewhere ahead, hidden among these ancient stones, was the battlefield, where Callum had made his final stand, where 32 civilians had lived because one man chose to die. Kira felt her chest tightening with every step her horse took upward. Memories crashed over her in waves, Callum's laugh, his hands teaching her a new bow technique, the way he'd kissed her goodbye the morning he left for war, completely unaware it was the last time. I can't do this, she said suddenly, pulling her horse to a stop. The others reined in immediately. Bryn looked at her with concern, Isolde with understanding, Tamsin with gentle encouragement. You can, Isolde said firmly, one step at a time, one breath at a time. We're here with you. What if the memories are too much? Then we hold you through them. But Kira, the older woman's voice softened, what if they're not memories you need to fear? What if they're gifts you've been too afraid to unwrap? Kira didn't understand, not yet. They continued climbing. An hour later, they crested a ridge and found it the battlefield where the Borderlands War had claimed so many lives. The evidence of violence had faded over 3 years. Grass had grown back, wildflowers dotted the meadow nature, reclaiming what war had torn apart. But Kira could still see it, could still imagine the chaos, the blood, the desperate fighting, could still see Callum standing in the center of it all, buying time for innocence to escape. There, Nepheli said quietly, pointing. In the middle of the meadow stood a cairn, stones carefully stacked into a memorial taller than a man maintained with obvious care. And around its base, growing in impossible profusion, were flowers unlike anything Kira had ever seen. Moon-petal lotus, pale blue petals that seemed to glow with their own internal light. Dozens of them clustered around the memorial like offerings. He's honored here, Bryn whispered. Look. As they approached, Kira saw the other signs. Small tokens left by travelers, carved figures, braided grass, simple offerings of thanks. Someone had etched words into the largest stone of the cairn. Here fell Callum Ashford, who chose love over fear. The sob escaped before Kira could stop it. She dismounted on shaking legs, crossed the meadow, and sank to her knees before the cairn. 3 years of held tears finally breaking free. I'm so sorry, she gasped. I'm so sorry I wasn't here. I'm sorry I hated you for leaving. I'm sorry I blamed Darius when you made your own choice. I'm sorry I've been half alive instead of honoring your sacrifice by really living. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of the lotus flowers. And in that moment, Kira could have sworn she felt something, a presence, a warmth, a sense of being held by invisible arms. Then a voice spoke from behind her. He saved my grandchildren. Kira turned to find an elderly woman emerging from the tree line, ancient beyond measure, leaning on a gnarled walking stick, eyes sharp despite the deep lines of age etched into her face. I'm Elder Wren, the woman said, guardian of this memorial. And you must be Kira. I've been waiting for you. Oh, you knew I'd come. The lotus only blooms for those the fallen wish to save. It's been growing here for 3 years, waiting for the one Callum loved to finally arrive and claim it. Elder Wren moved closer, surprisingly spry, despite her apparent age. He spoke of you in those final minutes. Made me promise something. Kira's heart clenched. What? He made me promise that if you ever came here, I would give you this. The elder reached into her robes and withdrew a small leather journal, weathered but intact. He kept it during the campaign. Wrote in it every night. His final entry was the morning of the battle. With trembling hands, Kira accepted the journal. The leather was soft, worn by Callum's touch. She could almost feel him in it, his energy, his essence, his love. He knew, Elder Wren said gently, knew the mission was likely suicide. But those civilians, 12 adults, 20 children, they had no other chance. So he wrote his goodbye, gave the journal to me for safekeeping, and walked into that battle smiling. Said it was worth it. Said you'd understand someday. Kira opened the journal with shaking hands, flipped to the last entry, saw Callum's familiar handwriting, slightly rushed but still legible. To my fierce, beautiful Kira. If you're reading this, I didn't make it home. I'm sorry. Sorry I won't see your face again, won't hold you, won't grow old beside you the way we planned. But I'm not sorry for the choice I'm about to make. There are children here. Babies, Kira. The youngest is 6 months old. And if I don't buy them time to escape, they'll die. All of them. I can't live with that. Won't live with that. I know you'll be angry. You'll rage at fate and at me for being reckless. You'll probably hate Darius for bringing me here. Don't he tried to stop me? Pulled rank, but I disobeyed. You'll build walls around your heart and swear you'll never love again. Don't, please, my love, don't let my death kill you too. You're too fierce to fade, too full of fire to become ash. I need you to promise me something even though I'm not there to hear you say it. Live, really live. Not just survive, but thrive. Laugh until your ribs hurt. Love someone new with all the passion you gave me. Let yourself be happy without guilt. Because that's how you honor me, not by grieving forever, but by being so fully alive that my sacrifice meant something. Find someone who'll stay. Someone who won't be reckless like me. Someone steady and strong who'll grow old with you and give you the life I can't. You deserve that. You deserve everything. I love you. I'll always love you. But from wherever I end up, I'll be cheering for your happiness, not your mourning. Be fierce. Be free. Be fully yourself. All my love, Callum. The words swam as tears blurred Kira's vision. She pressed the journal to her chest, feeling the weight of permission she'd been desperate for without knowing it. Callum had released her, had asked her to love again, had practically begged her to find Darius. He gave you his blessing, Elder Wren said softly, 3 years ago before you even knew you needed it. That's the kind of love that transcends death. Kira looked up at the cairn, at the flowers glowing in the fading light. The lotus. How do I harvest it? You don't harvest it, you receive it. The elder gestured to the blooms. Speak your need aloud. If your intention is pure, the lotus will offer itself. Kira stood on trembling legs, approached the flowers, Later, hand on the cairnstone, still warm from the sun. Callum, she said, voice breaking, I loved you. I still love you. But I love Darius too, and he's dying from a curse wound he got trying to save others just like you did. I need the Lotus to save him, to give us the chance you wanted me to have. Please, please let me save him the way I couldn't save you. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the largest lotus bloom began to glow brighter. Its stem loosened from the soil and the entire flower lifted as if by invisible hands floating toward Kira. She cupped her palms beneath it, and it settled there gently, still luminous with inner light. Thank you, she whispered. To Callum, to the mountain, to whatever force had granted this miracle. Elder Wren smiled. You have 3 days to reach him before the crimson moon rises. The lotus will stay fresh if you keep it close to your heart, literally. Its magic responds to love. Will it cure him? The elder's expression turned grave. It will suppress the curse, perhaps even reverse some of the damage. But curse wounds are stubborn, child. Full healing may require more. What more? That I cannot say. Every cure demands its own price. You'll know what's needed when the moment comes. They rode through the night, slept in shifts, pushed the horses to their limits, drove themselves past exhaustion. The lotus rested against Kira's chest, tucked into a silk pouch that Nepheli had provided its gentle warmth, bleeding through the fabric like a second heartbeat. Through the nascent bond, Kira could feel Darius weakening. The curse was accelerating, sensing perhaps that salvation was near and fighting to maintain its grip. She pushed harder, urged the horses faster, silently begging him to hold on. Just 3 more days, please. Hold on for me. They reached Packlands as the sun set on day 41, 2 days before the crimson moon. 2 days until the ceremony that would either bind them forever or see them separated by law and fate. Kira barely paused at the gates, rode straight to the healer's quarters where Darius had been confined, burst through the door to find him unconscious, skin pale as death, breathing shallow. No, the word came out as a command. No, you don't get to die. Not now, not when I finally figured out how to live. She pulled out the lotus, placed it on his chest. Nepheli immediately began preparing a tincture, while Isolde helped strip away Darius's shirt to expose the curse wound. It was hideous. Black veins spread from a central scar on his ribs, creeping toward his heart like poisoned roots. The skin around it had a sickly gray pallor, and Kira could see it pulsing with malevolent energy. The curse is fighting, Nepheli said grimly, trying to kill him before we can administer the cure. Hold him down, this is going to hurt. Kira braced Darius's shoulders. Tamsin took his legs. Bryn held his hand, whispering encouragement, even though he couldn't hear. Nepheli crushed the lotus petals, mixed them with sacred oils, and moonwater created a paste that glowed with the same blue light as the flower. Then she smeared it directly onto the curse wound. Darius's eyes flew open. He screamed. His back arched off the bed muscles, seizing as the lotus magic battled the curse for control of his life force. Black smoke rose from the wound, acidic and foul-smelling. The veins pulsed wildly, trying to spread faster than the cure could work. It's working, Nepheli said through gritted teeth. But it's not enough. The curse is too old, too entrenched. The lotus will buy him time, weeks, maybe months, but it won't cure him completely. Then what will? Kira demanded. I don't know. Darius's hand found Kira's, gripped it with desperate strength. His eyes focused on her face, lucid despite the agony. Enough, he gasped. This is enough. You tried. You gave me more time than I had any right to ask for. Let me go peacefully instead of fighting the inevitable. No, Kira leaned down, pressed her forehead to his. You promised me you'd fight. You promised we'd have a future. I'm not releasing you from that promise. There's no cure, Kira. Just accept the bond, Isolde said suddenly. The dual alpha bond. That might be enough. Everyone turned to stare at her. What are you talking about? Nepheli demanded. Think about it. 2 alphas bonded at the soul level, sharing life force. If the curse is draining his energy, Kira's alpha blood could constantly replenish it. A perpetual cycle of healing. Isolde's eyes gleamed with sudden certainty. It's never been tested because dual alpha bonds are so rare. But the theory is sound. Theory, Nepheli repeated skeptically. You want to bet his life on theory? I want to bet our lives on love, Kira said firmly. On the bond. On us being stronger together than apart. She looked down at Darius. The crimson moon is tomorrow night. Can he survive until then? Nepheli checked his pulse, examined the wound. The lotus paste had stopped the curse's spread, stabilized the worst of the damage, but Darius was still desperately weak. Maybe, she said finally, if we keep applying lotus treatment every few hours, if he rests, If the curse doesn't surge again, maybe. Then we proceed with the ceremony tomorrow as planned. Kira's voice held all her newfound alpha authority. And we trust that love is stronger than any curse. The crimson moon rose in a sky painted with impossible colors. Deep reds bleeding into purples, gold streaking through clouds like molten metal. The ancient oak at the heart of Packland stood silhouetted against the spectacle, its branches spreading wide enough to shelter the hundreds of wolves gathered for the ceremony. Kira stood at the edge of the clearing, wearing ceremonial leathers, dyed deep blue, the color of loyalty, of water, of adaptability. Her hair was unbound, flowing down her back in dark waves, and in her hands she held a single white arrow, the same arrow she'd shot at Darius that first night, carefully preserved, a symbol of how far they'd come. Bryn fussed with the leather ties at Kira's shoulders, hands shaking slightly, with nerves. "You look beautiful," her sister said. "Callum would be proud." "You think so? I know so. He's probably up there somewhere organizing a celebration." The image made Kira smile despite her fear. That sounded exactly like Callum turning even his widow's remarriage into a party. A throat cleared behind them. They turned to find Broderick Thorne dressed in formal council robes, expression uncharacteristically soft. "May I speak with you?" he asked Kira. Bryn excused herself, leaving them alone. "I wanted to ask your permission for something," Broderick said. "Would you let me walk you to the ceremony? Stand in for the father you lost." He met her eyes. "Let me have this one moment to honor my daughter's memory by celebrating you the way I should have celebrated her." Kira's throat tightened. She thought of her own father, dead 5 years now. Thought of how he would have loved this moment, would have been so proud. And she thought of Broderick's daughter denied her own happy ending by fear and prejudice. "I'd be honored," she said softly. His smile was tremulous and grateful. "Thank you." The ceremony began with the ancient words. Elder Miriam stood beneath the oak voice carrying across the assembled pack with the weight of ritual unchanged for generations. "We gather under the crimson moon to witness the bonding of alphas. Darius Wolfheart, king of the Northern Territories, and Kira Ashford, weapons master and awakened alpha. Two souls, two powers, united as one." Kira walked forward on Broderick's arm, hyper-aware of every eye upon her. She saw friendly faces in the crowd, Tamsin grinning through happy tears, Isolde nodding approval, young Finnegan watching with wide eyes. She saw neutral faces, curious faces, faces still uncertain about this unprecedented union. And she saw Darius. He stood at the base of the oak, wearing black and gold, looking stronger than he had any right to after yesterday's ordeal. The lotus treatment had given him back some color, some strength, enough to stand, enough to speak his vows. But she could see the tremor in his hands, could feel through their nascent bond how much effort it took him to remain upright, could sense the curse lurking beneath the temporary reprieve waiting for its chance to strike again. This has to work, she thought desperately. The bond has to be enough. Broderick placed her hand in Darius's, stepped back with a small bow. Darius's fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and real. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he whispered. "Where else would I be? Running. You're good at that." "Not anymore." She squeezed his hand. "I'm done running from the things I want." Elder Miriam began the bonding rites, ancient words in an older tongue speaking of moon and blood and the ties that bound soul to soul. The pack joined in the chanting voices rising in harmony that seemed to make the very air vibrate. Darius spoke first. "I choose you, Kira Ashford. Not because fate demanded it, though I'm grateful fate is occasionally wise, but because you're the strongest person I've ever known. Because you taught me that strength isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing love, despite being terrified. Because every day with you feels like winning a battle I didn't know I needed to fight." He swallowed hard, voice roughening with emotion. "I choose you knowing I might not have decades to give. Knowing you are risking pain again. Knowing I'm asking for trust I haven't fully earned. But I promise you this, whatever time we have, I'll spend it loving you fiercely. Protecting you, making you laugh, being the steady ground beneath your feet when you need it and the wind at your back when you don't. I'll honor Callum's memory by being worthy of the gift he gave me, your heart." Tears streamed down Kira's face. She didn't bother wiping them away. "I choose you, Darius Wolfheart," she said, voice clear despite the crying. "I choose you knowing it's terrifying, knowing I could lose you like I lost him, knowing love is a risk that sometimes ends in devastation. But I'm choosing to be brave anyway, to trust that some things are worth the fear." She looked out at the assembled pack at the faces watching with such hope. Callum taught me how to love with my whole heart. He showed me what it meant to be cherished. And in his final words, her voice broke slightly. He asked me to live fully, to find someone who'd stay, to be happy without guilt. She turned back to Darius, met his eyes directly. You're that someone. You're steady where he was chaos. You're autumn where he was summer. You're the future instead of the past. And I love you, gods. I love you not because you're replacing him, but because you're entirely yourself. Because you see all my broken pieces and still choose to stay. Because you make me want to be brave enough to hope again. The pack's chanting rose voices, building toward the climax of the ceremony. Elder Miriam raised her hands. The claiming marks, the final seal. This was it. The moment where theory would be tested, where their bond would either save him or they'd discover Isolde had been wrong. Darius leaned down, pressed his lips to the juncture of Kira's neck and shoulder. She felt his teeth extend, felt the sharp pressure, and then the claiming bite. Pain and pleasure and power all surging through her at once. But beneath it, she felt something else. The curse sensing the bond forming, surging forward in a last desperate attempt to kill its host before the magic could take hold. Darius staggered. The curse wound erupted in black smoke spreading across his chest with terrifying speed. He was dying, right there in front of everyone. The lotus couldn't hold it back anymore. No, Kira didn't think, just acted. She bit down hard on his shoulder, completing the bond from her side. And as her teeth broke skin, as her alpha blood mixed with his, she felt everything, his pain, his fear, his love, his desperate hope that she'd survive this even if he didn't. And she felt the curse recognized it for what it was. Not just dark magic, but a parasitic entity feeding on his life force, draining him day by day, year by year. Her alpha blood surged forward to meet it. But alone it wasn't enough. The curse was too strong, too entrenched. Then Darius's alpha blood joined hers. And suddenly they weren't two separate forces fighting the same enemy. They were one power unified and multiplied, a bonded feedback loop of healing energy that crashed against the curse like a tidal wave. The curse fought back. Kira felt it trying to spread to her through the bond, trying to drain them both. Felt it burning through her veins like acid. But every time it gained ground, Darius's strength flowed into her, replenishing what was lost. And every time it attacked him, her power flooded back, reinforcing his defenses. They were a circuit now. A perpetual exchange of life force that the curse couldn't overcome because there was no single source to drain. The curse realized its mistake too late. Caught between two alpha bloodlines feeding each other, burning with combined power it had never encountered before, the curse began to fragment, to crack, to die. Black smoke poured from Darius's wound, and Kira felt the malevolent presence shattering into harmless fragments. Felt it burning away like morning fog under twin suns. Felt the curse that had been killing him for 3 years simply cease to exist. The wound on his chest closed. The black veins faded. Color returned to his skin. And through the bond now fully formed and unbreakable, Kira felt his heart beating strong and steady. Felt his life force no longer draining away, but circulating, whole and healthy and free. They pulled back from the claiming bites, simultaneously staring at each other in shock and wonder. It worked, Darius breathed. Kira kissed him, hard and fierce and full of joy so intense it felt like flying. The pack erupted in cheers around them, but she barely heard through the rushing in her ears. He was alive. They were bonded. The curse was gone. They'd won. The celebration lasted until dawn, but as the sky lightened to gray and gold, Kira found herself drawn to the cemetery. Darius walked beside her, their hands intertwined, the bond between them, humming with contentment and love. They stood before Callum's grave in the quiet morning, and Kira felt nothing but peace. "Callum," she said softly, "this is Darius. He's stubborn and patient and terrible at archery. He tried to save you even when you disobeyed orders. And he loves me with a steadiness that makes me feel safe enough to be completely myself." She smiled through tears. "I think you'd like him. I know you wanted me to find someone like him." Darius placed a carved wolf at the base of the headstone, his final offering to a man he'd mourned almost as long as Kira had. "Thank you," he said simply, "for loving her first, for teaching her that love was worth the risk, for asking her to live. I promise I'll spend my life making sure she's happy, that your sacrifice meant something, that the fierce, beautiful woman you loved gets everything she deserves." The wind picked up rustling through the cemetery trees, and Kira could have sworn she heard Callum's voice on the breeze. Finally, you're free." She was. The training yard was chaos in the best possible way. Young wolves practicing combat drills. Finnegan no longer the frightened boy who'd lost control, but a confident young warrior, demonstrating proper stance to a group of recruits. Tamsin shouting encouragement from the armory steps. And Broderick observing it all with the proud expression of someone who'd learned that change could be beautiful. Kira stood at her workbench, not in the training yard today. 6 months pregnant made archery impractical. But she could see everything from here, could feel through the bond that Darius was approaching before she heard his footsteps. "The healer said you should be resting," he said, appearing into the doorway. "The healers worry too much. I can feel through the bond that your back hurts." Traitor bond. But she was smiling. "I'm just organizing arrows, hardly strenuous." "Anything more than sitting with your feet up is strenuous, according to Nephili." He crossed to her, placed his hands gently on her belly. "She's active today. She's been kicking all morning, takes after her mother. Fierce and stubborn, I'm doomed." His smile was radiant with joy. They'd reformed the council, integrated dual alpha leadership protocols, strengthened alliances with neighboring packs, built something unprecedented and lasting. But Kira's favorite moments were these quiet ones. Just the two of them feeling the baby move, planning a future that stretched out bright and full of possibility. "What are you thinking?" Darius asked. "That I'm happy, genuinely, completely happy." She covered his hand with hers. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this again. After Callum, I thought the best I could hope for was surviving. But this," she gestured at their life, their love, their future. "This is so much more than surviving. This is living." "He asked you to live fully," Darius reminded her gently. "You're honoring his memory by being exactly this happy." "I know." She smiled, then winced. "Your daughter just kicked my ribs." "Apologize to your mother," Darius said to her belly. Kira laughed, the sound bright and free and utterly unburdened. She could feel both of them now in her heart, Callum's bright summer warmth and Darius's steady autumn strength. Could honor what she'd lost while celebrating what she'd found. Could be grateful for her past while embracing her future. Could finally truly completely live. And somewhere in the stars she hoped Callum was celebrating too.